Alright guys, welcome back. Winter here. Today I just wanted to make an updated settings guide with Legacy of the Void, the most recent expansion. A lot of the gameplay settings and control settings and just other options in general have been updated. And I wanted to go over my recommended settings. I'm just going to jump into a unit tester here so I can show you guys. This is something you might want to check out as well, just the unit tester in general. It's something you can find on the arcade. But I'm just going to go run through all the basic gameplay settings and a few of the other settings that I recommend that aren't necessarily enabled by default, that I find a lot of new players don't actually realize. So we're just going to run through them today. If you have any questions, make sure to leave them in the comments or anything like that. But hopefully this is helpful for you guys to just get yourself set up
Game started.
in a good place to start playing. I'm just going to go ahead, like a few zealots. But let's just run through these options here. Alright, I'm not going to go over, video settings. They're obviously want to be tuned to your computer. I have them on pretty high because I stream on a pretty regular basis. Sound settings. There are a few things here. I personally don't like the music on. That's not really a big deal. It's personal preference. Things like game volume during alerts and response sounds can help you out. I like to have as much information as possible, but sometimes if there's an alert, like your workers are under attack, then you want to hear that and you can turn your game volume down. I don't find that to be really an issue. This is all personal preference here. Voice chat, LOL, mouse and keyboard. I like mouse wheel zoom because it allows you to do things like see cloaked units a little bit easier. I'm not going to be able to demonstrate it here in the unit tester, but you know observers and Dark Templar, if you're actually able to move in like this, even if the unit is static, I can't show you the vision right now, but even if the unit is static, it'll make it look like it's moving. So being able to zoom in and out for a split second, you might see me do that in some of my games, helps you to see cloaked units a little bit easier. Past that, all of this is, like, I disable the Windows key because you don't want to be accidentally hitting it. Alt-Tab is something, well, once again, personal preference on all of these. Alright, now the meat of it. These are my gameplay settings. These are not necessarily the default ones, but show alerts are the alerts that show up on the left-hand side of the screen, like units finished producing, or larva inject, or something like that. You'll see them in-game. I like them because you can actually click on them as well. Like, say, 3 mutas just finished. You can actually click on the alert and use that to add mutas in your control group, for example. Always show worker status. That's the workers on your hatcheries, your command centers. It helps you know if you have full mining saturation. Simple command card takes away a lot of the options. You just look at the command card down here. You got things like patrol, hold position, stop position. Simple command card takes those away. And that's, I guess, mostly designed to make it less intimidating for new players. I definitely recommend taking that off. If you don't know those options exist, how are you eventually going to start using them? Show current order indicator. Once again, more information. It'll make the little indication on the ground where your units are going after you put out the command. I find it useful, especially for things like overlords and stuff like that. Select all larvas for Zerg player. It's just personal preference. Biggest one, enable enemy unit selection, disabled by default. I'm not actually sure if that's true in Legacy of the Void, but it allows you to click on your enemy units. I actually get the question, why can't I see what building is making? Or why can't I tell what upgrades a unit has? That's because you don't have this enabled. Pretty simple. Need to have that on. That is not up for debate. Display experience points. This shows experience whenever a unit is killed or something like that. I like it especially for ZVZ in Ling Baneling, where you can kind of get an idea of how many units were killed if you weren't paying direct attention. Once again, personal preference, but as someone who always likes having all the information, I like to keep it on. Allow Windows restore. Alright. I mean, that's not bad to have on in case you forgot you were in queue. I've never actually used that. But colorblind mode, I'm not colorblind if you are. Some people just like the colors. Instead of like green, red colors, it makes it orange and blue. So if you want to change your colors in that way, it's not really a big deal. Team colored Lifebar. I'm sure some of you use it. Once again, personal preference. But when I started playing Starcraft, as you can see, the team colored Lifebar instead of green, red, yellow, or whatever. I would say that's definitely personal preference, but I prefer to have it off personally. Enable additional team color textures and team color intensity. This is what increases the brightness and contrast of your colors. It allows the units to pop out a little bit more on the field. Once again, personal preference, but personally, I recommend turning it all the way up to 11, and I appreciate how they give you that option. Show unit life bars. I'd say the majority of high-level players have them on always, or at least damaged or selected. Once again, I keep saying this, but I like having as much information as possible. It makes it seem a little bit more cluttered. But for example, you have it on damaged, and only the units that have taken any damage. And you can also have selected as well, but I personally recommend on always. But that's just me. Control groups unclickable. While I don't see myself looking at the control groups very often, like I already know that I've hotkeyed things, control 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever, but I can't accidentally click it down here. You really shouldn't be clicking your control groups. You should be using the hotkeys anyways. And a lot of pro players actually take it off so you can't see the control groups. It might be like, well, how do you know what's there? Well, you just kind of cycle through with your hotkeys, but I like to have it. Personal preference, once again. There's no real best way there, I would say, but it might get annoying if they are clickable and you keep accidentally clicking them. I know I used to, so. These are showing the position of flying units on the terrain. I'll just show you that right now. This is actually a pretty big deal because especially a lot of new players won't realize that you don't want to attack, or you don't want to, well, let's throw some storms on there. But for things like AoE damage or spells or something like that, like hitting Ravager shots is another one. If you can't actually tell where your opponent's units, like right now if I storm on top of these Void Rays, it looks like it's hitting, but it's not actually hitting those front Void Rays there because the indicator is at a different spot on the ground. So it's just helpful to be able to hit those air units a little bit more consistently, for example. So I would recommend having that on at all times. Now, this is the only other one. I prefer to have the default observer interface. It just makes it a little bit more like in-game. If you're doing like casting or something fancy like that, you can use the WCS. And there are actually other replay interfaces. If you look them up, you can download. But I see no reason not to have these things up there. One more thing is actually out of game that was added in Legacy of the Void. So I'm going to jump back over there. But it is language and region. This is new for Legacy of the Void. Additional game servers were added for, I believe, the Asian, Australian, or Southeast Asia, and American servers, where instead of just defaulting, I believe Europe only has one server at the moment. But for Americans and South Americans and those of different areas in wide geographical ranges, instead of picking best match on preferred game server, especially if you play team games, I recommend picking the one with the lowest ping. Like, I'm nearest to Central United States, so I pick the one. As you can see, there's a dramatic difference. If you happen to be in like a team game with someone from Australia and you have best match on, it'll actually default sometimes to the Australian server and you'll have 200 plus ping, despite being technically on the American region. So this is something that some people might not know about. I recommend, if you have the option, picking the server nearest to you to minimize your ping and save you a little bit of frustration. But hopefully you guys enjoyed this recap of the updated settings in Legacy of the Void. Thank you guys for watching. Make sure to like, subscribe, comment. Give me ideas on what more you would like explained that might not be obvious to someone like me who's been playing for a long time. But thank you guys for watching. See you later.